Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's workshop. We're so lucky to have Dr. Carlson here to talk to us about how to support our students as they go into post-secondary settings. So just a little bit about Dr. Jane Carlson. She's a licensed psychologist and board-certified behavior analyst at the doctoral level. She has decades of experience in leadership and teaching roles across the country to improve practices in the treatment of autism. And she also works at Utah Valley University, currently in the School of Education. And she directs Melissa Nellison. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Okay.
Yeah, you got it right.
Whew, I was nervous about that one. The Melissa Nellison Center for Autism. She also coordinates the MED program for ABA and teaches the Autism Studies program. So again, we're honored to have her here to teach us about how to effectively advocate for our students as they transition into adulthood, really. And as you attend today, please submit your names in the chat box, and I'll record those names. And also, please remember to register for this course on Midas. And if that needs to be resent out, I will do that. But feel free to send me any questions as well privately in the chat, and I can hopefully get those answered for you. But I will pass the mic on over to Dr. Carlson.
Thank you, Rowie, for that very nice introduction. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I know how busy you all are. We talk about, you know, what the shortage that we have of school psychologists statewide. And I know you guys are out there doing the good work and trying your best to meet all the needs while we're trying to build the pool of psychologists out in the district. So thank you for taking your time on this Friday afternoon to get this information. So I'm going to share my screen. And I just want to let you know that I do unfortunately have a hard stop at 3 o'clock. It's graduate applications procedure. So we have interviews starting at 3 for applicants to our graduate program. But I am happy to have anyone email, give me a phone call if you have any questions afterwards or anything that I can help you with after today's presentation. And I'll also share the PowerPoints with Lauren or Rovi to get out to you if you're interested in accessing those as well. So let's get started. I'm going to quickly, I'm going to go through, hopefully, are you seeing a large screen with the picture of someone smeared with blood and a zombie behind them? So I just wanted to let you know that I also on occasion am a zombie extra. So that's me in the zombie makeup in my very brief appearance in the fantastic movie called Spring Break Zombie Massacre. So if you ever have a chance, this is one of the stars of the movie. His name's Matty. He was a zombie fighter and actually one of the writers of the movie. So occasionally I do things other than teaching and overseeing programs for folks in the post-secondary environment. So when my kids were getting ready to go to college, my sister sent me this little meme. I don't know if any of you have seen this, but it was basically just a bunch of skills that it's good for kids to have when they're heading off to do things on their own. And I always think it's a great introduction because sometimes when we're getting kids ready for college, we think about things that are on this list, like writing an essay or can you send a good email? But some of these other things, maybe not. Like, do you know basic first aid? Like, can you take care of yourself if you get an injury? Or basic home care or car maintenance and things like that. Sometimes we don't think about those kind of things. So getting ready for college is more than just your academic record. So let's start with some statistics. And I'm going to tell you you're going to see an interesting split in these statistics. Because we have a lot of information in general about young adults with disabilities who enroll in post-secondary education. But one of the issues with the current statistics is that up until very recently, there were very few programs available for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to attend college. There are a growing number of post-secondary programs now, and I'll talk with you about some good resources where you can find current information about the programs that are available. So what we know, and this is from the National Longitudinal Transition Study 2, is that among all disability categories, about 54.9% of young adults elect to go to any sort of post-secondary education program. And you can see the breakdown for folks with all disabilities. And then in the population of folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's a much lower rate. But again, we have been in a situation for a long time where there just weren't options for students. So hopefully we're going to see these numbers begin to rise. But as you can see, for the population of folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, only 6.3% were reporting enrolling in a four-year college in the last NLTS survey, 21.5% in a two-year, and 15.2% in voc tech schools. So we have relatively low numbers of students with intellectual disabilities currently who are considering post-secondary education options. For students who complete, so this is percentage of students who enroll who actually complete. There's not a good breakdown information currently for students with intellectual disability. So we have very good data for students in all disability categories. And in intellectual and developmental disability, we just have this one number of 40% who complete any sort of post-secondary program. So again, of the students who enroll, which was a relatively low percentage, less than half of those students are completing those programs currently. So if you, in plain English, so for every 100 students with IDD, only about 28 will enroll in any kind of post-secondary education. And of those 28, only about 11 will actually complete a post-secondary education program. So again, pretty low numbers right now. So just a general question, and when I do this live, we have a little bit of discussion about it, but I'll just present this to you. So when you think about why we pursue post-secondary education, obviously there's the academic credential, there's the opportunities to participate in all those things that come along with college life, job readiness activities, social activities, that whole mix of things that happen in the post-secondary environment. But the number one reason that we attend post-secondary education is that we hope to improve our options in our careers after school. So the purpose in general, when you survey students who attend college, it's to improve their career choices and their career outcomes after college. And that's very much the same goal for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And what we know right now is that as adults, only about 46% of individuals with IDD are employed outside the home in any sort of employment, whether it be very part-time, supported employment environments. And the rates for competitive employment are quite low. So what can we do to help our students with intellectual and developmental disabilities achieve their goals? Well, one of the things we can do is really understand the options that are available for folks. And there are basically 5 broad categories of post-secondary college programs. So I'm not going to be talking about the specialized vocational technical kind of prep programs that are available for individuals with intellectual disabilities. So those agencies who are providing specific vocational training. I'm talking specifically about 2 and 4 year college programs in this options setup. So we have 5 things. So we have regular enrollment competitive application process programs. We have regular enrollment, open enrollment application process program, which is slightly different than the first one. We have regular enrollment with specialized services available. We have programs that have a specialized application process and a college developed specialized program. And then The last category is those programs that have a specialized application process and are classified as either TIPSID or IPSID programs. And I'll explain what that means as we go through the options. Okay, so regular enrollment competitive application process. So that's probably what the majority of you experienced when you were applying to college, right? There's a standard application. You have to hit certain cut scores in terms of your GPA from high school, your SAT or ACT scores, in order to even qualify to apply to colleges. So this is that competitive enrollment process. And in these kinds of 2 or 4 year colleges, students pursue credit-bearing certificates and degrees that are offered through the regular course catalog. And basically they rely on a combination of the natural supports that are available on campus and any accommodations that they can receive through the Office of Accessibilities. And there is a subset of students with intellectual disability, and particularly students with autism who are classified as having a developmental disability, that are able to access college through this process and do pretty well. So I've worked with students in my career who have had borderline IQ scores, who meet the technical diagnostic criteria for intellectual disability or autism and intellectual disability, and have done well academically, have achieved a high school diploma, and are able to access college through the competitive process. For students with IDD, that's a relatively small percentage of the population. So the next option is regular enrollment, open enrollment process. So open enrollment universities, and there are a number of them around the country. We have several here in the state of Utah, either 2 or 4 year programs, have a more forgiving application process than those competitive application programs. They still require a high school diploma or alternative. And I wish, one of my wishes, so you folks who are insiders in the public ed system, maybe you can help me work this out. There's confusion among, well, many people in the system between about the difference between an alternative diploma and an alternate diploma. I'm sure you all have had discussions with people about that difference as well, to help families understand. But what open enrollment colleges require are either a high school diploma or an alternative. So the GED, basically. And they do not accept alternate diploma, even in open enrollment universities. You have to have a degree or high school diploma or equivalent. The standard assessment is usually required, but the scores are typically used to identify students who might need some support coming into college, rather than those competitive enrollment processes where you have that cut score, and if you're under that, you're not going to be considered. So we have quite, in this kind of situation, there is a larger population of students with intellectual disability or other developmental disabilities who are able to access college through these open enrollment processes. So in these programs, again, it's typical college admission. So the students pursue those credit-bearing certificates and degrees from the regular course catalog. The college may offer developmental classes, because often open enrollment universities have a more robust set of support services for students than typical competitive universities. So for example, UVU is an open enrollment university. So we have, in addition to the typical Office of Accessibilities supports that students can access, we have a variety of tutoring supports. We have a student leadership program that embeds peer mentors in certain courses that we know are courses where students being able to pass them, typically gen ed courses, are indicators of their later college success. So we have peer mentors embedded some of those programs. We have a writing center, again, that provides all kinds of assistance for students to improve their writing skills, to edit and perfect their writing assignments that they put in. And we just got on-demand online writing support here as well, which is fantastic. Students can upload a document at any time and get feedback and assistance virtually on those documents. And then we have a variety of other supports that are available for students on campus as well. So again, those open enrollment universities tend to offer a wider variety of natural supports and can make college more accessible for many students with intellectual disability. So the next is regular enrollment specialized supports. So these are this is a whole variety of programs that are out there. And there are many more that are autism specific than open to students with IDD that require students to come in through whatever the regular enrollment process is, whether that's competitive or open enrollment. And the students enroll in credit bearing certificates or degrees. And then the difference between these and the other programs that I described is that these specialized programs are often either a la carte services, where you can select from some additional services that are available specifically for students. And some even offer wraparound support for students where they'll have a specific peer mentor who supports them, or programming outside of the typical academic environment. So I'll show you a couple of sources where you can find information about these kind of programs. And again, there's a lot of variety in these regular enrollment specialized supports programs. Okay, so now we get into specialized application programs. So these are the last two categories. So specialized application processes and college developed specialized programs. So these are programs that have an application process that is separate and apart from the typical application process. The way that students apply can vary depending on programs. So some require that the students begin the typical application process, and then there's a branching off that occurs at some point where the typical competitive students go one way and the students who are applying to the specialized program have a different application process. These programs most often do not require a high school diploma. So these are programs that are able to be accessed by students who have an alternate diploma or certificate of completion, as long as they meet the other program requirements. The admissions criteria for these programs are set by the individual college and university. So students who are looking for these programs really need to do their homework to find out what the criteria are for the individual programs that they're looking at. And the population served and the program components that are available vary very widely. So for example, Syracuse University, which is one of the first universities in the country to offer programs like this, actually has 3 separate specialized application college developed specialized programs. One is a program where students work towards credit bearing certificates. Another is a program where students live on campus and take regular credit bearing electives and only do the rest of their time is spent in specialized vocational training programs to work on their career readiness and career development skills and has job experience. And the other is a specialized program that they run in conjunction with an adult services organization that provides on-campus vocational training opportunities for students with significant developmental disabilities. So again, that just sort of gives you an idea of the wide variety of these kinds of programs that are available out there for students now, which is, it's great. It's awesome that there are so many campus-based programs that are available now for students with developmental disabilities. So these, again, can offer a real variety of certificates and degrees. And it's important for students to understand what they're signing up for. So some of these programs only offer a certificate of attendance or a certificate of completion. So the student will not walk away with a transcript that contains any record of college courses attended. All the way up to programs that require the student to work towards a fully credit-bearing certificate in the program. So again, a lot of variety in what these programs offer. So students really need to make sure that they have the option to pursue the kind of certificate or degree that they're interested in these kinds of programs. And again, they might not offer any kind of recognized credential or credit-bearing certificate. And then the last category is the specialized application process and programs that are classified as either TIPSID or IPSID. So TIPSID programs are college programs that are currently receiving grant funding through the U.S. Department of Education to create, basically to develop new programs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And those grants come with rules about who's eligible to attend the programs, the kinds of program components that have to be included in these programs, and there's support and oversight from the National Coordinating Center. Many of you may have heard of Think College. So Think College is the oversight unit that make sure that the TIPSID programs are all meeting the grant criteria. And then IPSID programs are typically programs that have had TIPSID funding and are now in their post TIPSID phase. So they're basically standalone. So they technically could meet the criteria of the previous program description. So for TIPSIDs, they have grant funding to start up their program. Interestingly, none of that grant funding can be used to directly support students. Their program development, it's program development grant funding. And that's a question that we often get from teachers in the community. They'll ask us if our program is free to the students who attend because we have a grant. And it's not, unfortunately. We wish we could offer it for free to students because as you know, for all high school students, the costs associated with college can be a barrier. So these are grant funded. It's a highly competitive process to be awarded a grant. So these programs do not require a high school diploma for enrollment, and each TIPSID program determines what their application process will be and their requirements for their students. It is required that students who apply to these programs have a documented diagnosis of intellectual and developmental disability. It doesn't need to be their educational classification, but they do have to have a documented diagnosis. And the testing that's submitted to document that must be current, meaning that it should have taken place within the previous 3 years. So one of the questions I get often from school administrators and school psychologists is, why are we requiring current testing when IQ scores tend to be fairly stable? And it's really 2 reasons. One reason is that it's considered best practice, as I'm sure all of you know, to do a thorough reevaluation as students enter their post-high years, their 18 to 21-year-old years, where they're still eligible for services. So it is best practice to do a thorough reevaluation at that point, so you can really hone in on what that student's goals and objectives are going to be for those 3 years that they have available after 12th grade. And also the contemporary literature in IQ testing indicates that for students, particularly who initially test in the 50 to 70 IQ range, often have more movement in their IQ scores than we used to think was possible when they acquire more skills. And my personal hypothesis about that, and again, this is my personal hypothesis, I'm not basing this on any empirical literature, is that we have a lot better services for students in schools now. And we know that IQ scores are highly correlated with vocal verbal behavior, speech and language abilities, basically. And many students are able to access services that are really helping them improve their skills and abilities in that area. And that directly affects some movement in their IQ scores. So we really need those most current IQ scores. Now, here in Utah, I recognize 100% that we have a shortage of school psychologists right now. And so what we are telling school psychologists who contact us about this new testing is that we will accept at our program, and Utah State might be different, but if you just do the testing and send me the protocol with the scoring, we'll take that. You don't have to write a full new report for us. As long as we've got that new documentation and we have their last full report, we can accept that. Hopefully one day we'll be flush with school psychologists, and you guys will all have very reasonable caseloads and really be able to do this. But we know how strapped you folks are right now. So one of the requirements under these TIPSID goals is that the program has to be moving towards recognized credentials. So there's not a requirement right now that these TIPSID programs allow students to pursue recognized credentials, but the program has to clearly show that they're taking steps to move towards having a recognized credential and not just a certificate of completion or a certificate of attendance. And the goals for all of these programs are independent living and competitive employment, which frankly, if you think about it, wasn't that all of our goal when we were in college, right? We wanted to be able to live on our own and support ourselves through our employment. But again, these programs vary depending on the college or university that they're affiliated with. So again, just like any college search, students with intellectual disability are going to want to look at the variety of programs that are available. They're going to want to look at the kinds of supports that are available, the kinds of credentials that are available, if any, so that they're making a good selection and really finding something that's going to fit their needs and help them move towards their goals. So some questions to ask to help your students. Is the program residential or commuter? And on the Think College website, in their college search, it clearly says whether a program has residential options or is a commuter school. And there's about a 50-50 split now of TIPSID programs that are residential versus commuter. You want to ask what credentials are offered to students, and are they credit bearing or industry recognized? So that are they a credential that's actually going to be associated with the college transcript, which, as I'm sure you know from the employment market, is going to be perceived as better or a higher credential than just coming out with one of those certificates of attendance or completion. Are students taking courses from the regular college course catalog? So that's an indication of inclusive college classes when they're from the regular college course catalog, or are they only able to take specialized courses that have been developed for the program? Then the students need to understand the array of support services that are available. So accessibilities offices or disability services offices on college campuses offer a relatively uniform set of supports for students who qualify for accommodations, and students are able to fill out the paperwork to meet the criteria for accommodations, and then work with the counselor in those offices at universities to receive accommodations. So what you really want to ask about are the supports that are available to students outside of the accommodations that accessibility services offers. So what is the tutoring structure like? Is there writing support? Does the library offer supports for students who are doing research or trying to find source material for projects that they're doing? Are there peer mentors available on campus? So really asking about that additional array of services can be a game changer for students. Does the program have peer mentors that are specifically for that program? And what are the supports that they provide? Because again, that will vary. So in some programs, the peer mentors serve as job coaches. In other programs, they serve as tutors. In some programs, they are supports for the student for all of the non-academic things that help you be successful in college. Some programs have peer mentors that can serve as social supports for students on campus. So again, there's a wide variety of how those peer mentors are utilized in these TIPSID and IPSID programs. You want to ask if the program is a CTP. So CTP, I'm probably telling you information that you already all know, is a certified transition program. So that's a federal designation that universities and colleges have to apply for. And what CTP status affords students is an opportunity to apply for certain categories of financial assistance through the FAFSA process. And it's not all financial aid options are available to students, even in CTP programs, but it does afford more opportunities for students. For example, they can get Pell Grants, they can get federal work study, and they can qualify for certain student loan programs if they qualify through the FAFSA in a CTP program, even if they're students who have come into the university without a high school diploma through a specialized application process. And then students need to know what costs are associated with the program. And again, these vary very widely. So most commonly, students have to pay regular college tuition and some kind of a program fee because regular university tuition often doesn't cover the set of peer mentor and other program supports or program staffing that is required to support students through these programs. There are some programs around the country who provide these programs at zero cost to students. So there are a number of programs around the country that have very significant endowments that allow students who qualify and are accepted to these programs to attend free of charge. We don't currently have any of those in the state of Utah, unfortunately. Okay, so what is available in Utah? Well, right now we have 3 elevated programs. We have the UVU Passages program, which is an autism specific a la carte set of services. And Weber State has a set of additional services that students can access through their Office of Accessibilities if they are accepted through their regular enrollment process. So they have to be students with a high school diploma, but have an IQ that would indicate that they may need additional support to be successful in college. So we have five sort of organized sets of services that are available now. Every college and university in the state has an Office of Accessibility services, and there are other services offered at other universities. But these are the sort of the most structured, coordinated services that are available right now. So let's talk about the elevated programs. So Aggies Elevated was the original TIPSID program in the state of Utah. So they had 2 rounds of TIPSID funding, and now they serve as a technical assistance role to our current TIPSID grant, which is an alliance grant to support the development of new TIPSID programs in the state. So Aggies Elevated is located on USU's main campus in Logan. It's a 2-year program that offers on-campus residential housing, and students are required to live on campus their first year. And then the second year, they can either continue living on campus or they can choose to live off campus if that's their preference. All students pursue the ICCS certificate, and this is a certificate that's common to all 3 of these elevated programs in the state of Utah. What makes up that program varies by university. And the ICCS certificate is a fully inclusive credit-bearing certificate that was put together specifically for the TIPSID programs, but has been fully accredited by each university that has one. So this is a regular certificate. It appears in the regular course catalog, and any student at the university can pursue an ICCS certificate. But the students who come into the elevated programs are required to do that. So Aggies Elevated is our only TIPSIT in the state that has outcome data, because the other programs are new and we haven't graduated any students yet. And what USU is telling us from their Aggies Elevated program is that of the students who finish the 2 years at their program, 86% of them are employed postgraduate, which is significantly higher than the rates that you see if you look at students who don't participate in these kind of post-secondary programs. And even more impressive is that 34% of their graduates from Aggies Elevated continue on to achieve either an associate's or a bachelor program. They just had their first full bachelor's degree graduate last year, and they've had a number of folks who have continued on and achieved their associate's degree. And they have a priority application deadline of December 3rd. So if you want to have early consideration, students should try and get their application in then. And then I think their final application deadline is somewhere around the end of January. So the second elevated program in the state is Wolverines Elevated here at Utah Valley University. So we are a 3-year program, and we're a commuter school. So we don't have any dormitories on campus. Though if you've ever been down here to UVU, or if you're a UVU grad, you know that our campus is ringed by housing developments, right? We have a lot of apartment options for students, but again, they're considered off-campus housing, so are not included in the program, and the program doesn't offer supports in those programs. But like any student who comes to UVU, students can choose to, if they're able, to live off campus. But as of right now, all of our students that we have in so far are commuting to campus. All of our classes that our students participate in are fully inclusive. So we don't have any classes available to our students that aren't also available to all the other students on campus. Again, because we're an elevated program, and so Elevated is a brand here in Utah that really means that students are pursuing a full credit bearing certificate. So we haven't, as of yet, in the state branched out to some of the variety of programs that you may see in other states that have been at this a little bit longer. So all of our students work towards an ICCS certificate. So our ICCS certificate is comprised of courses that we've specifically developed to move our students towards those TIPSID goals of competitive employment and independent living in the community. And then the other half of the certificate is courses from the regular course catalog that are relevant, again, to the goals of that certificate program. Our students also are able to, beginning in their second year, pursue any of our 50+ industry recognized certificates that we offer here to all of our UVU students. And for those of you who know the history of UVU, it started as a vocational technical school, and we still retain let's just call it a boatload of certificates that are related to those voc tech programs. So we literally have everything from certificates in early childhood education, IT certificates, to things like automotive technology. There's a certificate in aviation science. There's a certificate in, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the name of it, but something to do with the fire prevention field. So we have a wide variety of certificates that students can enroll in. Now, those certificates are standard industry recognized certificates. So they do have to meet whatever prerequisite requirements are listed in the course catalog, and they have to maintain whatever GPA is required of that program when they're in those programs. So our program is relatively new. We have 2 cohorts in, so our second cohort just started this past fall, and we're currently accepting applications for our third cohort, which will start in August of 2023. For vocational opportunities, our students engage in a variety of career readiness opportunities, including job sampling, on-campus internships that may be paid or unpaid, and community employment opportunities, which again may be paid or unpaid depending on where they are in the program. And our goal is for every student to have had paid work prior to exiting our program. And our priority application deadline is December 10th. Our full application deadline is passed, but we're still accepting applications until we fill our cohort. So our application process is still open. And then our newest program in our alliance, by the way, is called the Utah Higher Education Inclusion Alliance. And that is what we wrote our TIPSID grant for. So the grant is specifically to expand the number of programs that are available for students here in Utah. So Aggies Elevated at Utah State University in Price just accepted their first cohort that began this past fall. So they're currently in their second semester. That's a 2-year fully inclusive residential program, which has an option for year 3. So they're a regional campus in Eastern Utah out in Price. They have the ICCS certificate that the students work towards in their first 2 years of school. And then if the students choose to, they can stay for a 3rd year. And in that 3rd year, they would work towards one of the industry recognized certificate programs that is available through USU Price. And like UVU, they're an open enrollment university that has a very strong vocational technical background and offers a significant array of those industry recognized certificates. So in both USU Price and UVU, students have the opportunity to finish the program with 2 credit-bearing certificates awarded through the typical process by the university that they attended. And their focus, like UVU's, is on employment opportunities, and their priority application deadline, again, because the USU system is uniform, is December 3rd, the same as Aggies Elevated. And they have a pooled application process. So all the applications for Aggies Elevated, whether it's for Price or Logan, go through the same application portal, and then they review the applications and recommend to the students which program they think would be the most appropriate, because they are qualitatively different programs, even though they are called the same thing, Aggies Elevated. So those are the 3 TIPSID programs that we have in the state. Aggies Elevated at Logan is now not technically a TIPSID because grant funding is no longer supporting their academic programs. So their requirements for intellectual disability documentation and current testing are a little bit looser than the Price program and the UVU program, who are currently have program funding under the TIPSID program, if that makes sense. Okay, so does anybody have any questions so far? And then I'm just going to spend about 5 minutes just talking about some things that are important in preparing students to come to these programs, and then I'll leave a couple minutes for questions at the end.
I do have a question regarding what kinds of tests you're looking for. Let me say that again differently with a different.
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand. It was muffled. I couldn't understand what you said.
I forgot I was on a screen that doesn't have a good speaker.
So, oh, no worries.
The requirement, what tests are you looking for? Are you only looking at IQ tests, or are you looking at like adaptive functioning as well?
Well, they need to meet, they need to have in their record a documented IDD diagnosis. So they have to somewhere in their record have a diagnosis of intellectual and developmental disability. And then again, we've sort of modified what we're expecting in terms of testing, because we know depending on the district that you're in and your current workload as the school psychologist, you know, in some districts, it's really unreasonable for us to expect you to do a full battery of tests for them to get into our program. So as long as they have a decent set of assessments that meet their eligibility requirements, they carry that intellectual disability diagnosis, and we have a current IQ score that is consistent with that IDD diagnosis, we will now accept that. So you have a little bit of wiggle room, because we also collect all of the information from their current IEP, that final report that's generated when they exit special education that summarizes, you know, what they've achieved in the special education program. So we're collecting a set of information from.
If they have autism, that doesn't matter. It has to be ID.
Right. For the TIPSID programs, it has to be autism plus intellectual disability. So we will accept students with autism who also have a diagnosis of intellectual disability. Yeah.
Okay. So at the school I work at, it's a special school for the deaf and the blind, and we don't, it's kind of surprising, but we do not look at any classifications other than once they're in for vision or deafness,
Right.
we don't ever even go with ID or any other classification. So we don't diagnose in schools. And then also they would never have that diagnosis or classification here, because
Right.
so for those kids, what do you recommend?
Well, some folks like that, and educational classification is not intellectual disability. So it might be other health impairments, or something else. As long as they have diagnostic testing somewhere in their record that shows that they qualify for IDD, an IDD diagnosis, and we have a current IQ score that is in that range that would qualify them for an IDD diagnosis, we can accept that. So their educational classification doesn't have to be IDD, again, as long as they have that diagnosis in their record. So for some of your students, again, because they're going to a specialty school for their sensory differences, may need a full battery if they're looking to qualify for some of these programs, depending on what the student has in their record.
Okay. Yeah, and like I'm thinking of a student we just submitted for Aggies Elevated, but like he never had a diagnosis. The parents have never gotten that. And we, as a school, we can't really say they need to go get one, but I guess coming from, if Aggies Elevated requires it, we don't say that from the school perspective, because then we might have to pay for that diagnosis. So we just do the educational classifications.
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
That helps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I believe that Aggies is able to, so if a family, and we have families applying for, individuals applying for our program who are in that position where they need a diagnostic eval. And well, because we're a resource hub for the autism community here at the Center for Autism, we keep a list of diagnosticians who are in our local area, and we share that information with families if they're needing to go out and get an evaluation to qualify. And again, you know, the reason that we require all of that, and it has to be within a certain time frame, is because we are under that TIPSID grant umbrella right now.
Okay.
So for the programs who are functioning on their own, those IPSID programs, often it's a little bit looser, because again, they don't have to report to the feds that, yes, every single person, and here's our documentation. And so you know, we have that reporting requirement under the grant.
Okay.
Makes
Thank
sense.
you.
Okay.
That helps.
Okay. So let's see here. So what factors determine if someone's going to pursue higher education? Well, interestingly, the number one indicator is a parent or a teacher believing that the student can be successful. So it's none of the things that we would expect, like what kind of a program is the student in, what's their academic. No, it's literally us believing that they can do it, and sending that message to them that this is an option for them. This is something that could be helpful for them, and that they could be successful pursuing higher ed and employment. So high expectations, again, that's the number one factor that we see. So students who have been told that they can be successful, who have learned good, work habits, who have been allowed to learn from failure experiences. And again, I'm running. I always create way too many slides for these presentations. So if you want me to come back and do part 2, I'll be happy to do that for you. Super important things that people have to understand and to get ready. So folks need to connect with vocational rehab, because often vocational rehab will pay for, particularly in CTP programs, at least a portion of students' tuition if they're in a program where they're pursuing a fully accredited certificate, which all of our programs, our elevated programs in the state are. And often they'll also pay for the mentor support that they get. So in addition to any financial aid they're eligible for, often they'll be able to get some funding through vocational rehabilitation. So, and, unfortunately, one of the kind of interesting things that we're seeing as we're getting applications in, and we're talking among our programs about what we're seeing through the application process, is many of our students who are more academically capable are not necessarily getting hooked up with those voc rehab services during their transition process. So we're having to do the referral as part of our process rather than them having that happen naturally as part of their transition program. So again, if you guys are very influential in terms of what happens along that process. So as you're working through the IEP process for those individuals who are getting ready to apply for these kind of programs, really making sure that they and their family understand that voc rehab process so that they could potentially have access to some of that support. Those updated assessments that we already talked about. The student should develop an understanding of accommodations versus the kind of services and supports that they can get through an IEP process, because those are distinct things. And that's an important distinction for students to understand about themselves and their own ability to access services so that they can begin to advocate more independently when they get into those post-secondary environments. Establishing a team of support. So, again, we should be engaging those students in a person-centered planning process as they're moving through those years heading towards transition. Again, so that they're getting a better understanding of the people who are in their circle of support, what kinds of supports those people can give them, if they need to add to their circle of support to help them be successful. We should be working with students to be able to recognize and articulate their strengths and support needs. So is that student able to talk about how they're personally impacted by their disability, the things that they're good at, and again, be able to talk about that at some level, because when they move through college and then get prepared for those competitive employment opportunities in independent living, they really need to be able to both understand and express those strengths and needs so that they can access the supports they need in the community. And then building in expectations. So again, that number one factor that's associated with students going to these programs is building that expectation that this is a possibility for them, that they can go to programs and be successful. And unfortunately, we still see a lot of stereotyping that students with intellectual disability will never be able to achieve this kind of thing, or and low expectations of students. So what to expect in the college environment? So I'll end on this slide. So in college, which is very different from K-12, students are considered the agents of their own education. So in secondary school, students with IEPs receiving services and supports, their parents can still request to talk to the teacher every day. They can do notes back and forth between the parents. In college, the hub of that communication is the individual student. So again, their ability to pass messages, to interact with the professor if they're having difficulty is something that you can start working on, again, by building those basic skills of just understanding your disability, being able to articulate supports that you need in environments, being able to understand where you might need some help and the things that you're really good at, so that you can, help people understand your strengths and your capabilities. And students also need to understand that there is no college equivalent of an IEP. So there are 504 plans, but there's nothing that's going to provide the array of services that you would get under IDEA in the college environment. There is literally no entitlement for adults with disabilities when it comes to requirements for service array. So they can have those 504 plans, which will help them get their accommodations through accessibilities, but they're not going to see something that's similar to the IEP. It's helpful if they understand the kind of accommodations that are available. And I know that a lot of colleges and universities are very happy to set up sessions where your students can learn about accommodations that are available in the college environment. But they really need to understand the academic expectations, so that, and in college, accommodations are accommodations. There is no curriculum modification. There is no lowering of the academic standards for credit-bearing classes. So they need to understand that the work, they're going to need to be able to demonstrate mastery of the curriculum for that class, and that can't be modified if you're going to get college credit for a class. Students are expected to communicate with professors, and we offer supports for that through peer mentor programs in many of these programs, or program staff will assist the student in that communication until they build the skills to be able to do that on their own. They need to be able to navigate a course management system. So all colleges and universities use some kind of computer-based course management system now, and it's important for students to get some experience in being able to navigate those things. And then every college and university also has a student code of conduct, and students need to understand that their conduct on campus needs to fit within that student code of conduct. And we've actually created a sort of Cliff Notes version of our student code of conduct for our students. And we're actually working on, in conjunction with our accessibilities department, in producing a student code of conduct that's in more of a graphic novel format, so it's more accessible to a wider variety of students on campus. Okay, and I will end my presentation right there. And again, I'm happy to come back and talk with you more if you're interested in more of the ins and outs of things that we can do in students' educational programs when they're in secondary education to better prepare them. And I think I have time for maybe 2 questions. And while we're getting those together, thank you all so much for coming and spending your Friday afternoon with me. Oh, hi, Julia Hood. So
I
any
have
final
a question, if no one's going to ask? It's not, I think I understand the 3 programs you talked about better, but so say I have a student who has an average or low average IQ, but their executive function, their adaptive skills are just really poor, where they need, despite that IQ, they still need a lot of support.
right.
What kinds of programs are available besides these 3?
I would look for programs. So I would look at Weber State because they have some support services that those sort of a la carte support services that I talked about. We have at UVU for students on the autism spectrum, we have some a la carte services. So for example, we have an educational coaching program for students on the spectrum that is over and above what they would get for accommodations. So those students have a peer mentor who meets with them 3 times a week and works on all of those other things that help you be successful. So they work with the student to identify where they feel they need support. They set goals with that student and support them with things like navigating that online course system, figuring out how to talk with the professor if they're having a problem, organizing their assignments for the whole semester so that they're breaking them down into chunks and setting themselves up so that they know exactly what they need to do as they're moving towards the semester, helping them navigate group projects if that's a difficulty for them. So again, they're not doing academic support because that's usually available through tutoring centers on campus, but they are supporting those executive functioning kinds of things, those social communicative aspects that may be a barrier for some students.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, and again, I apologize that I have to sign off, but thank you all so much for coming. And I'm happy, Rovi, if you want to print out any questions that came in the chat and email them to me, I'm happy to respond to those through email. And again, you know, if you have any questions or need any other information, just reach out to me, jane.carlson@uvu.edu, or you can find me through our faculty directory at UVU. But yeah, I'm happy to provide you with any information so that we, you know, get the word out and hopefully have a lot more students thinking about college.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carlson. I will
Thanks,
let you know.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Please register onto the MIDAS course if you haven't.